Morning. Welcome to C3. My name's Matt. As Aaron already said, I appreciate you coming out this morning to worship with us and listen to our message. I hope I don't have too much trouble here. We good? Sorry. Lost me. Is that better? Can't move? This? How about that? Sorry, that's my fault. My apologies. I don't do this every week, as you probably know. If you're first time, you don't know that, but I usually don't. Trent, Aaron, they're the regular speakers. I'm filling in. I appreciate the opportunity to do this. I love to speak, to share a message. And they've got this whole routine down, like coming up here, getting everything set up, the microphone, I'm not great at it, I guess. That's what we're saying right now. So, appreciate you being here. We're starting a brand new series, Friends in Low Places. It's interesting, talking about friends. How many people have ever received bad advice from a friend? You ever received some bad advice from a friend? Whether that's like, hey, go check out this restaurant. It's amazing. And you go and it's just awful, right? Or maybe they've said, hey, go watch this movie. This movie's great. I loved it. And then you turn on that movie and it's like, oh, that was awful. I wasted 2 hours of my life watching that movie. I got a couple of friends at work. We always talk about different movies. And we always like to give each other a hard time about that because it's like, they've recommended a few movies that I'm like, that was garbage. That was awful. That was just not worth my time. Bad advice, we all have friends that we seek out advice from. And really this kind of goes into our message for today. Whether it's, advice in our life, we seek it out for, simple things from restaurants to movies, but even beyond that, maybe relationship advice, money advice, career advice, all these different kind of things. A lot of times we like to talk to somebody else before we make a move on something, don't we? Well, today we're going to dive back into a really Old Testament story to see a guy that received some really bad advice. And I'm going to go ahead and give this disclaimer as I, kind of building this up. I did it in the first service. I'm going to do it again this service. This is a tough story, and I'm like, this is why you gave this to me, Trent and Aaron. I appreciate that. Like, you really gave me the short straw on purpose. This is a hard story. It is, I'm talking like Jerry Springer type stuff, like maybe even a little bit worse than Springer. This is bad. And I'm telling you, I'm going ahead and warning you, but if you got young kids in here, I've kept it PG the first service. I'm going to keep it PG for this service just as well. And I hope I'm building a little bit of anticipation so you're like, man, I can't wait to hear what he's going to say now. So, because it's juicy, but it's bad. I'm just telling you, it's really awry, askew. It's messed up. So, full disclaimer, I'm going to do my best with that. But it really, when you look at life, you look at it and you think sometimes we can learn a lot from people's bad decisions, can't we? And really from bad decisions, but we can also learn a lot from people's bad advice, and that's really where we're at in this story today. And I'm going to give you a little rundown instead of like trying to, I know that I had to refresh myself on this whole story. Because it's Old Testament, you got a bunch of names that people that, I'm just going to be honest, some tough names too. But there's about 5 characters in this story that I want to mention. And so I'm just going to give you the character list, kind of almost like some credits at the beginning, just to say who are big main characters in this story. So where we're going to pick up is in 2 Samuel. In 2 Samuel, it's Israel, the whole Jewish people. They've finally gotten to become a nation state in a sense. They've got a king, and that's where we're at in this story. It's King David. It's finally they have this promised king that they've wanted from all this time. And they have him sitting on the throne, helping them to become the people that God has called them to be, basically. And so King David, in his time, he chose a lot of wives. Let's just put it out there. He had a lot of different wives during his reign as king. And because of that, he had a lot of different children. And so he has a lot of, half brothers, half sisters, all the way across the board because he's got all these different wives. And so we're going to look at a story today about Amnon. Amnon is actually, based on what we've seen and read in the Old Testament, this should have been David's direct firstborn son. You know how it's so important to have that firstborn. That firstborn's going to be the next king. That's who they're being trained as. Well, Amnon is David's son. Amnon has another half brother and half sister, Absalom and Tamar. That's the other two people, brother and sister, half brother, half sister to Amnon in this story. And then Jonadab. Jonadab, what kind of names are these? Someone asked me afterwards, said, I would have just changed these names to John and Billy and, and made it a lot easier. But I was like, yeah, I probably could have done that, but I didn't do that. But Jonadab is the cousin. He's cousins with Amnon. He's cousins with Tamar and Absalom. And that's really where we pick up. The one big piece to all that, like I say, I want us to remember Amnon was the firstborn. What his identity was he was being set up to be reigning under David. When David was done, he should have been the next person in line. His identity was that he should have been the person that would have sat on the throne. And I say would have because we're going to see why that doesn't happen. And he never makes it there. And it's important because decisions of that he makes. And the decisions that he makes are partly not only because of his own selfish desire, but also because of listening to bad advice from a friend. And that's what we're talking about. Why is it so important for us in our lives to have people that surround us to help us to be the best versions of ourselves? So I want to pick up here in 2 Samuel 13, 1 and 2. In course of time, Amnon, son of David, fell in love with Tamar, beautiful sister of Absalom, son of David. And Amnon became so obsessed with his sister Tamar that he made himself ill. And she was pure and seemed impossible for him to do anything to her. So what we're talking about is Amnon, again, this is getting weird already, right? Amnon falls in love with his half-sister. He's basically obsessed with her. And it says that he makes himself sick because he can't be with her. And it says that he makes himself so sick out of that. You see, oftentimes in life, we got to realize, what is our focus? Amnon's focus was on his unhappiness. You see, seeking out our own unhappiness, our own happiness makes us unhappy. His focus was what he did not have. Sometimes in life it's too easy to get caught up in what I don't have. And then I just get so focused and saying, I'm so depressed, so sad, I'm so upset because I don't have X, Y, or Z. You see, the question for us should always be, where is my want coming from? Is my want coming from a desire in my life for what I want, a base desire? Or is my want coming from a design of how God designed me to be? My desire or from my design? You see, when we follow our desires, it can lead to this unhappiness and wanting things and being so focused on these things. I think about the story, you can track these stories. The interesting thing with all of these is the Old Testament has little snippets that, all right, this tracks right on top of other times. You know, a lot of us, in Sunday school probably heard this story about Eve being in the garden. And Eve being in the garden, and she's all happy, right? Except for when that snake comes in and says, did God tell you you can't have that apple? You can't eat of any fruit in the garden? You see, he was pointing out something she did not have. And guess what? Created unhappiness. Focused on what she didn't have. And so, same thing here. Amnon, so focused, so consumed in his own life with saying, what don't I have? God designed us to operate in a way that we're supposed to live life in contentment, knowing that He's going to take care of everything that we need. Jesus talks about that multiple times. Be content. Don't worry about what you'll have for the next day. Don't worry about all these other things. God will take care of that. But we a lot of times can get pulled away by our own desires and say, this is what I want. I was joking with my wife, talking about this message, and I said, we were talking about the kids. It's like how often you go into a store and immediately they're unhappy, right? And why? Because they see everything they don't have. They go into the store and they're automatically thinking, all right, I got to have X, Y, and Z to be happy. She was telling me that they are so quick about it. They're asking which store they're going to. They're already thinking, all right, if we go to this store, I want a Kinder Egg. If we go to this store, I'm going to ask for a little toy, a car. If we go to that store, I'm going to ask for candy. Because they already think that those things are going to bring happiness. And those are all just things out of desire. How often are we in our own lives in the same way, seeking our own desires, thinking those things are going to make us happy? Oftentimes we focus, again, on what we don't have, and it makes it harder on us. I thought about it in regards to, when it's cold outside. You ever think about when it's cold outside and someone says, man, it's really cold out here. Doesn't it seem like it just got 10 degrees colder as soon as your attention is brought to it? We focus on those things in life. And all of a sudden, our demeanor changes. And we start focusing on what we don't have or what we're facing. And it makes things worse. You see, Amnon was so upset with himself in this story, upset about what he didn't have, that he made himself basically sick. But along comes Amnon's good friend, Jonadab. It says, now Amnon had an advisor named Jonadab, son of Shimeah, David's brother. So again, his cousin. Jonadab was a very shrewd man. He asked Amnon, why do you, the king's son, look so haggard morning after morning? Won't you tell me? And Amnon finally says to him, I'm in love with Tamar, my brother Absalom's sister. So basically, Amnon had got so upset, made himself so haggard, looking so disheveled, that his friend notices. I always thought that was important. His friend notices that he's in distress, that he's upset. There's something wrong with him. That's what a good friend should do, right? And Jonadab seems to be a good friend in that regard. What's wrong? Tell me what's wrong. Let me help you. I'm here to help you. And so finally he tells him, this is what's wrong. That's good. That's a good friend, right? That's what good friends are supposed to do. They're supposed to be there for us and seem like they're there to help us. In our life, we need friends, though, that are people who will tell me what I need to hear. I need people in my life, and you need people in your life to tell you what you need to hear, though. You see, Jonadab comes along, and he's like, let me confide in me. But the question is, what does Jonadab do with that? He gives him some advice. You follow along there in 13:5 and 6. He says, go to bed with and pretend to be ill. And when your father comes to see you, say to him, I would like my sister Tamar to come and give me something to eat. Let her prepare the food in my sight so I may watch her and then eat it from her hand. So Amnon lay down and pretended to be ill. And when the king had came to see him, Amnon said to him, I would like my sister Tamar to come and make some special bread in my sight so I may eat from her hand. Now this didn't seem like probably that weird of a request from Amnon to his dad, David, because at that time, it was pretty important to know who was fixing your food, know who was giving you drinks, because poisoning and all those different kind of things, people were trying to always get at somebody. And so it wasn't that out of the ordinary. But Jonadab gave him that advice to fulfill his desire, not to help him live into his design. You see, oftentimes we have people in our life and friends. They may listen to us. But the question is, what kind of advice are they giving us? Is it good advice to help us be the best version of ourselves? Or is it bad advice to tell us, you deserve that? You do you. How many times have we heard that one? These little hashtags and things that's out there. You do you. You take care of you. You deserve it. You worked hard. And I'm sure Jonadab said the same things. You're the king's son. You deserve whatever you want. No matter what repercussions out of that, you deserve that. Does that sound like a good friend? You see, it's important for us in our life to really challenge and say, are my friends truly helping me to be the best version of me? Are they helping me to live into that design, how God has created me to live? Or are they helping me to be a lesser version? The question would be, what makes a good coach or counselor? It's somebody that's going to tell you what you need to hear. If a coach only told you that, all that was going on in your life, or a coach said, you're the best ever, and never told you how to change, how to adjust, it wouldn't make them a good coach, would they? Counselors in the same way, if you go to somebody and they only told you what they thought that you wanted to hear and not what you needed to hear, would that make them a good counselor? No. We need friends in our life that are willing to tell us what we need to hear, to challenge us, to push us in that way. Because oftentimes in life, it's easy to get caught up in emotions, isn't it? It's easy to get caught up in our emotions. Again, what our focus has been, what I don't have, what I want in life. What would make me so happy is if I had a new car, if I had a new career, if I had a new wardrobe, if I had a new phone, if I had a new, fill in the blank, whatever it is, some change that I don't have in my life, I would be better off. And you got to step back. And good friends will help you do that and say, do you truly need that? What's best for you in the long run? What's going to help you be who God's created you to be? Are you feeding into those desires? You see, I try to do that. I've got a couple guys I have coffee with, try to do it at least once a week. And it's people that they'll say that to me. I need people like that in my life. I feel like I've become a better version of myself because of that. Because I've got people that'll say, you don't need that. Challenge me, push me in that regard. We all need people in our lives that will help us be that best version of ourselves. Otherwise, again, we can get so caught up in our own emotions and get depressed and down on ourselves, or push us into a different, path of life that really is going to end destructively. You see, the true friends tell us the truth even when it's uncomfortable. That's what a true friend does. It's hard to do that, isn't it? How many of us are possibly friends like that? In the same way, where I'm saying that we need friends like that, but we also need to be that friend. We need to be that friend to everyone around us. To let people know, I want to tell you this because I care about you. My old boss used to say, I care enough about you to hurt your feelings. And I was like, I wasn't a huge fan of that. But I knew he did care about me. And he was a friend. But we need to say things sometimes that may end up hurting people's feelings. Not because he wanted to hurt my feelings or because we want to hurt people's feelings. I know your feelings may get hurt, but I need to tell you things that will be uncomfortable. And we need people in our life that will say things that will make us uncomfortable. That's what we need in our life. You see, we will experience true freedom when we're not enslaved to our own desires. We will experience true freedom when we realize I don't need everything that I think I need in life. And I challenge that, and I have friends that challenge that, and friends that continue to push me back and say, is this what you need in life? You see, 2 Samuel continues on the story. So Amnon does this. But when she took it to him to eat, he grabbed her and said, come to bed with me, my sister. No, my brother, she said, don't force me. Such a thing should not be done in Israel. Don't do this wicked thing. So Amnon followed the friend's advice, puts himself in a situation that continues on, and that advice takes him into a place where his desire overcomes him. Guess what? Turns out really bad. Amnon forces himself with her, and the story continues on. It's a bad look. It's a bad, terrible thing because of the advice of a friend. It could have been stopped. It could have been changed if he had good friends' advice. You see, when we're enslaved to our own desires, we'll pull other people down. Look around us. We talk about it often, and I talk about it just because of the field I work in, but addictions are all around us. Things where people give in to desires consistently. From gambling, to drug or alcohol, to shopping, to food, to whatever you might want to say, whatever addiction, fill in the blank. Those things are linked all the way back to a base desire. Those things have gotten out of control. And people allow those things because they've given into that desire, and guess what? We become enslaved to it. We become enslaved to those desires. But true freedom is about denial. True freedom comes from denying ourselves of the things that we think we want. That's why we have what we have in our life. That's why Jesus came and showed us this is how you should live life. If you want to know how to live into your design today, it's simple. Pick up the Bible and read how Jesus did it. You pick that up and he shows us. In Luke 9:32, he even says it. Listen. Then he said to him, whoever wants to be my disciple, he must deny themselves and take up their cross daily and follow me. He talks this. He says that at least in 3 different Gospels. They quote that in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. That exact phrase, that exact scripture. So it was a pretty important one for us to understand that it's not about always giving myself what I want. It's not always about giving in to my desires, but about living by my design. And for me to live into my design sometimes mean I need to deny myself daily of what I want. As much as I want to say, you know what, I deserve X, Y, or Z. You know, I've worked hard today. I'm going to do this. It's about living into that design and understanding that my true purpose comes from denying myself. And that true freedom comes from denying myself. And that's what Jesus showed us He was willing to do. And we should be willing to live that way in our own lives. You see, the right decision is not always the one that feels good. Jesus lets us know that He did that in His own life. I'm sure the path that He walked wasn't easy. And in the same way, Amnon didn't do what was right. Tamar goes on, what about me? Where could I go to get rid of my disgrace? And what about you? You'd be like one of the wicked fools in Israel. Please speak to the king. He will not keep me from being married to you. And he refused. And he violated her. Second, and Amnon hated her. After this fact, he hated her with intense hatred. In fact, he hated her more than he had even loved her. And Amnon said, get up and get out. Point being, Amnon in his life got what he wanted, but look where it ended. How many times have we gotten something and thought, man, I can't wait to get this. I'm going to be so happy when this happens. And you get it, and it's like, that wasn't great. That wasn't all I thought it was going to be. So much so for him that he allowed himself to be pulled so much and enveloped and engulfed with his desire. It says that he hated her. How often do we allow ourselves to be driven by our own desires and say, this is what I think I want, this is what I think I want, and then after I've, gotten all those things, you sit back and you think, how unfulfilling. You see, true happiness doesn't come from fulfilling our desires. It comes from denying ourselves and living by design. This story actually sets off a chain of events. In this one instance of Amnon wanting to do what he wanted to do, it sets off a chain of events that will carry through this family for years. It says that after this, Absalom ordered his men, listen, when Amnon is in high spirits from drinking wine, I say to you, strike Amnon down and kill him. Don't be afraid. I've given you this order. Be strong and brave. So Absalom's men did to Amnon what Absalom had ordered. Then all the king's sons got up, mounted the mules, and fled. Amnon follows his desires, and he dies. But because of that, that's not the end of this story. Like I say, this sets off a chain of events throughout the Old Testament that you can read. So because Absalom takes vengeance on Amnon, guess what happens? He gets exiled. Absalom gets kicked out of the kingdom. And Absalom says, well, I should be on the throne now that Amnon's not there. I should take this back over. He comes back. He fights with his dad. His dad gets exiled, kicked out of the kingdom. Absalom then goes on a wild spree to show why he should be king. Again, read about it. Some Jerry Springer type stuff. He's got David with David's concubines and all kinds of crazy stuff goes on. It's got David in exile. It's got murders. It's got killings, all because of this one event. You track it back to one person following their desire over their design. Sets off a chain of events that have repercussions for years. A lot of times we look at our life and think, oh, this won't hurt anyone, what I'm about to do. We don't realize the repercussions of our actions. We need to be cautious, and we need to look at our life and say, how can I live in my design? Do I have people that are willing to help me be that? Deny myself of my desires so I can live the way God has designed me. That's what we're called to do. Let's bow our heads. As we wrap up here today, just take a moment. Ask God in your heart, your mind, honestly, just to help to live your life by His design and to not always be caught up in my own desires. God, help us today to surround ourselves with people that are going to help us be the best version of ourselves. Help us to live by your design. What that means is help us to just deny ourselves of things that we think we need and think we want and think are going to make us happy. Help us to shun those things and really, truly just realize that we need to live according to your word. I pray, Father, you would just help us as we go down through this week, that you would help us to be good friends, seek out those good friends, and help us in our life to show love, mercy, grace in all that we do. We love you, God. We love you, Jesus. We love your Holy Spirit in our life. We praise you for all that you've done. Pray that you will watch over us, keep us safe, help us have a great week. In your name we pray. Amen. Guys, thanks for being here. Hope to see you next week.